China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, those are Chinese war drums. And that leads us to today's China Watch Radio question, which is, are we at war with China already? Welcome to China Watch Radio. Michael Olson here with Bill Graff.
Yes, I'm here too.
John T. Collier.
With you guys.
David Welch.
Good afternoon.
There you got it. Bill finally turned on your microphone, David.
Well, I didn't want any extraneous noise, so I turned it on at the last moment.
So, yes, that's the subject. We have a tough subject today.
Boy, do we ever.
Are we really already at war with China? So before we kick it off with our news of the day, a little overview with respect to why we even asked that question. You know, back in 1999, two Chinese colonels of intelligence in the Chinese Air Force wrote a book. And the book was called, translated to the American English as Unrestricted Warfare. And essentially, it was an update of Sun Tzu's masterpiece, The Art of War, in which Sun Tzu discusses how the smaller can beat the bigger. And that's the strategies of how that works in warfare. Now, what these two Chinese colonels came up with was that this should be an unrestricted warfare, which is to say, you should be at war even when you're not at war, which is what the Chinese have been doing since the year, just about 2000. At any rate, 1999, this book came out, and what happened shortly thereafter, somebody flew airplanes into the Trade Center. And these two colonels became heroes in China for showing the way on how to compete with the much bigger and much stronger United States of America. So, for the last 20 years, that is what they've been doing, conducting unrestricted warfare against the United States. And have we been conducting unrestricted warfare against China? No. We've been cooperating with them, doing business with them, thinking everything is going to be just right. So we find ourselves in this very interesting fix. And with that, let's kick off today's show with some news from the Pacific. Bill Graff.
All right, we have. First of all, I want to introduce you to remind you of something that was in the news just the other day. This is the President of the United States of America.
Very quickly, you didn't want to get involved in the Ukraine conflict militarily for obvious reasons. Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
Which is an interesting quote because technically I believe the commitment the United States made was to years ago to go along with China's idea that
one China policy.
One China policy. So someone's confused. And I don't exactly know who is confused. I think many Americans probably think we should defend Taiwan because they're, a country that we have been dealing with as a country, even though maybe technically they're not a country. They're a province. But in any case...
I think that one China policy probably dated from the time when we thought we were going to bring China into the world.
Correct.
And that there were going to be very nice people to
back
get
to
along
the Carter
with.
administration.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the second piece of sound I want to play for you, because it's recently in the news, is between Brett Baer from Fox News And Mark Esper, now, for those of you who don't pay attention to the news very often, Mark Thomas Esper is the American politician and manufacturing executive who served as the 27th Secretary of Defense between 2019 and 2020. He did not serve very long. He served under former President Trump, and Mr. Trump and he had various differences of opinion, but Mark Esper called him as he sees him, okay? As he sees him. So here is the quote between, this is a conversation between Fox News's Brett Baer and the former Secretary of State.
Defense.
Of Defense.
China. You write about Taiwan. Beijing is building a modern military capable of seizing Taiwan, isolating it, or compelling it to surrender. Do you think China, in the wake of Ukraine, is looking seriously at taking over Taiwan?
I think they've always been looking seriously at taking over Taiwan, and I think they're studying the Russian successes and failures and trying to figure out how they could do better. Look, I regard China as our number one strategic adversary in this century, and we need to prepare for that, and I don't think we are doing so sufficiently now. The other thing I note, though, is I hope Taipei is taking lessons from Ukraine, seeing the exceptional leadership of President Zelensky. And right now, Taiwan should be thinking about how do they improve their territorial defenses? How do they up their defense budget? How do they buy the right equipment for the fight they need to fend off the Chinese? I start getting concerned that folks will get wobbly when Taiwan, which is half a world away from Europe, will appear to be less in their front yard than it is today.
What do Americans not understand about China's military rise?
Whether it's diplomatic, economic, their counterintelligence and espionage, their theft of our intellectual property, all these things make clear that we're going to have to deal with China, and we need to orient ourselves. And again, right now, I don't think in all those areas we're in the position we need to be.
So he's talking about unrestricted warfare.
That's correct.
Yep.
Now, here is the interesting thing from today's news, as Michael alluded to just a moment ago. I saved the today's news till I played these two pieces of sound for you. Mm-hmm. Remember now, the President of the United States says we will defend Taiwan. The prevailing view of our agreements states otherwise because of the one China policy. Okay. In the news today, as we speak, about 2 hours ago, a meeting started in the South Pacific between the representatives of China and various countries down there. I'm only bringing this up. I'm not bringing it up out of order. I'm bringing it up so you know what's going on. Now, here is the response to the president's comments from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Well, that response was rather interesting. In fact, the color and the tone of the language they used was extremely interesting.
Yes.
It said, this is just a quote, "The U.S. has been racking its brains to play with words when it comes to the one China principle."
Right.
And I found this fascinating because they started using colloquial language instead of diplomatic speak.
It was very interesting to read this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you mean by that, David?
Well, it's interesting how normally that flowery diplomatic language that's used, between countries, it's got a lot of hidden meanings and kind of double ententes kind of to it, right? A lot of implications. They actually came right out and said something in a way that the common people would understand what they're talking about and how to understand of how
they didn't try to disguise it.
They didn't try to disguise it at all. In fact, they get really plain and they say, also, no forces, the U.S. included, can change the fate of Taiwan independence. Those forces are doomed to fail. And I thought this was really kind of interesting. If the U.S. continues to go down the wrong path, there will be irrevocable consequences for the U.S.-China relations. Yeah. And the U.S., this is what I found very interesting, the U.S. will have to pay an unbearable price. And I think they're serious.
Well, it makes you wonder what the unbearable price is.
Something up their sleeve, yeah.
Well, see, I'm thinking the unbearable price would be weapons. of mass destruction.
Well, it's interesting. We've been fighting for 20 years, or at least they've been fighting us for 20 years. We haven't been fighting them for 20 years. And it's been an unrestricted warfare in which they've been using all the weapons available without actually shooting bullets.
You know, if I could just build on that, Michael, they've been preparing for a new type of war.
Right.
We've done a great job in this country always of preparing for the last war. They've been very interesting in that they haven't invested in as many capital ships as we have. They haven't put into the same kinds of things that have made countries powerful over the 20th century. But they have invested heavily in drones, small arms that were highly capable, hypersonic missiles, right? They've been focusing on the smaller, cheaper weapons that'll take down a carrier, for example, than trying to maybe build its own carrier fleets.
I read something interesting along those lines, though, recently. Apparently, the United States military has already in its arsenal all of those drones that you're talking about and the hypersonic missiles. They just haven't told anybody.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. It's just interesting that China, maybe it's a little bit of...
well, we used all those drones in Iraq,
Yeah.
I think what David was talking about is the unrestricted warfare, where the strategy is you don't take on your competition's strength. You don't go aircraft carrier to aircraft carrier.
Right, exactly.
When you don't have a lot of aircraft carriers.
That's right.
So what do you do? How do you degrade a far superior enemy? And that's what they've been doing, degrading our competitive abilities.
Well, they've done a good job, too, with their show of force to scare the West back, off the edge of wanting to engage with them. A good example, this is from several years ago, the U.S. Navy launched an anti-satellite missile from one of our frigates in the Pacific. And I thought it was pretty impressive to shoot a satellite down. We had one of our own satellites was decaying out of orbit, and so we shot the thing down as a proof of concept, proof of force. The Chinese immediately, 2 weeks later, shot a satellite out of one of their orbits, their own, that was at much higher altitude, and it created a lot of space debris. But they wanted to show right away that they could actually clean out things like our GPS system. They could clean out, and they've made it pretty clear that they would actually blind us, through their military space program.
But the point being is that we have been fighting for 20 years, and they have been degrading us through many different ways. And now they're making a play in the South Pacific, as Bill Graff just mentioned. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting South Pacific with a 20-person delegation, and he's going to do business. What is he looking to do? Well, he's looking to follow up on what he did do with the where was he?
Well, he was in Guadalcanal and
the islands over there. I just lost the
Solomon.
Solomon Islands. Yeah. So he's following up on the victory in the Solomon Islands with trips to Kiribati, Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, East Timor.
Yeah.
So all of these very precious little outposts in the South Pacific, he's going to visit. Billy, you've been to them. I've been to them.
Yes.
I've seen the work that the Chinese government has been doing in places like Vanuatu with their Belt and Road initiatives. So they're going to do business. And what kind of business are they pitching these nations?
Well, I would venture to say they're going to pitch the same kind of agreements that the United States has with places like Palau, Truk, the Marshall Islands, places we've already established places. For instance, the one I'm really familiar with is Palau. I used to live there. And what happened a number of years ago was the United States realized that Subic Bay and several other large military bases were having problems. Subic Bay, of course, was wiped out by Mount Pinatubo. So was Clark Air Base. The volcano erupted and destroyed a whole bunch of infrastructure. Anyway, so the United States government decided we better hedge our bet. And so they made an agreement with the country of Palau. And they said, look, we'll fix your runway so we can land anything we want here. We'll make a a world-class long runway, wide enough to bring in a C-5A if we have to, in exchange for a whole pile of money every year. Billions.
So the New York Times and other organizations have seen what the Chinese are pitching these foreign nations, because the foreign ministry sent all of these countries a prospectus. This is what we want to do. And when we come and visit you, we want you to agree to these things, and then we'll issue a joint communique to the world to let everybody know that we have taken this position. Now, what they're looking for in this agreement with these 10 nations is a security agreement. Now, what struck me about this really quickly was how does the mafia offer protection to the cigar store owner?
It's exactly the same thing.
So either you pay me tribute and I'll take care of you, make sure nobody comes and touches you.
We'll protect you.
Yeah. Another thing they're looking for is agreements on fisheries.
Oh, see, this is the one.
Yeah.
See, that's the one that is dangerous.
Well, what they want is everybody's fish.
That's right.
That's as simple as
because
that.
they want to feed all those people they can't feed in China. But the problem that everybody in the South Pacific understands is soon there will be no fish.
Yeah, we'll see how well they know that. Another thing they're offering all of these countries is law enforcement. So
that's where Australia and New Zealand are upset.
Yeah. So we're going to take care of you with our law enforcement. Here's another thing. Internet. The China wants to control all the internet services in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Well, there's two ways they
then
get
offer them
internet
free.
out there. There's two ways. There's undersea cables and there's satellites.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, what they want to offer everybody in the South Pacific are Confucian institutes and classrooms in every country.
We've already talked about that on this program.
This is a perfect example of how you fight a war without shooting any bullets. And they're doing an incredible job.
And also, like I was referring to earlier with this demonstration of the satellites being killed, right? It's that selective show of force, right, to scare you back.
Right.
Right.
To support the language.
Now, can I point something out before we move on here? Because I think it's important.
Yeah.
What China is doing now, the United States has some degree of expertise with. If you'll remember, for years we fought a war where we didn't shoot bullets at anybody with Russia and the Soviet Union. Remember that?
Yep. So this is really an important initiative for Xi Jinping. Why? Well,
Keeps him in power.
because Xi Jinping is running for his third term as emperor, I guess it is.
Well, it's going to make him the equivalent of Mao Zedong.
So if he can capture these 10 islands without firing a shot, he will look very good to the fellows on the Politburo.
Well, it has the effect of surrounding Taiwan, right?
Exactly, you're surrounding Australia.
Yeah.
And
Well,
New
not only
Zealand.
that, you're also you're moving into territory traditionally governed and watched over by the United States of America.
And Australia, and so waltzing right in. So going to be very, very interesting to see how those other countries respond. Now, how did the Solomon Islands respond? They said, sure. And how did they manage to get to the Solomon Islands? How did they get them to say yes? Probably just gave them a bunch of cash.
That's right.
Yeah.
Gave the president, here's $3 million. You run with us, and we'll make you rich.
That's exactly what happened. If you read the news reports coming out of that area, the leader of the Guadalcanal region of the Solomon Islands made this agreement first, and it was for a pile of money.
In fact, I think you reported on that a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing we have pointed out on the show is the importance of the Solomon Islands, because that's like the choke point
That's right.
for ocean-going traffic to Australia.
To and from Australia
and around Malaysia
to New Zealand,
the Indian Ocean too. So
and
big deal.
And keep in mind that one of the biggest occupiers of the territory in the South Pole is right now in Antarctica is Australia, but China is working hard to get footholds into Antarctica as well.
And so these are relatively easy and cheap wins for Xi Jinping. If he can pull this off, it will be a big win for him at a very, very small cost. And the other thing that we should note is that he started to play footsie with Australia.
Yes.
And why is he playing footsie with Australia? Because Australia had a change of command, and now they have a Labour Party prime minister who is probably, like Joe Biden, is more amenable to working with the Chinese.
You know, you would think that, and that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that change in Australia. But boy, the Australian Parliament, they're still pretty adamant about fighting a good fight with China. So we'll see what happens.
A lot of their media too. When you look at from YouTube, their ABC network, Australian broadcast system. You look at some of their news broadcasts. It's really fascinating how hawkish they are in China.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, because
there it is. There it is.
But they're calling like they're seeing it. I mean, not like we're seeing here.
Now, to follow all of this up, we have Jaunty.
Oh, we do. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, maybe we can just go and do a little bit of history of trade agreements in Asia and Southeast Asia, and it might give us a bit of perspective on what's happening here. There was an article on CNN with the title "Biden Unveils His Economic Plan for Countering China in Asia." Now, this economic plan is called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Excuse me.
That's a mouthful.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's China's plan. I read the wrong. One. This plan. Damn it! Where is it in my notes now?
So that is what's going on. Is that we have a plan and China has a plan, right?
Yeah. Give me just a second here. So it's the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity is what Biden's new plan is right now. But let's just go back in time a little ways and go through the process here. So Obama was all excited about putting together the Trans-Pacific Partnership during his term in office and worked very hard on it, but he couldn't get it through the legislature. There's because of this sort of isolationist tendency that the U.S. politicians will have, and often for good reason, because we want to defend our manufacturing from being zipped off to other countries in other parts of the world, as we've seen happen, as we've already experienced. So that never really came to fruition, and Trump pulled us out of it in January of 2017. After that, it left quite a vacuum. A lot of these countries were quite excited about this idea, and China continued to press the issue, and in November of 2020 was able to put together the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, 15 countries, something like 2.2 billion people, and a substantial part of the world's GDP. So this was the U.S. pulling out, it's disengaging in the area to a large extent. Now, the new thing that Biden is now trying to put together, and a lot of folks it's interesting to try and research this, because a lot of these articles are calling it the long-awaited plan. He's trying to put together this not really a trade plan. It lacks any incentives like lowering tariffs or opening up new foreign markets. It actually focuses on these 4 pillars, which are quite different. So they're really comparing China's Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and the U.S.'s Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. It's not a one-to-one relationship at all, because the folks who are participating in China's things are benefiting from reduced tariffs and more open markets. What Biden is trying to put together with an interesting list of countries is something that's got 4 pillars, which are a connected economy, which deals with fair and resilient trade, labor, environment, climate, digital economy, transparency. It's like we want you guys to follow the rules, basically. A resilient economy in terms of supply chain issues. We want to work with different countries to make sure that we aren't going to have breakdowns in supply chains. A clean economy, which is, the whole clean energy decarbonization stuff. And a fair economy, which has to do with tax and anti-corruption topics. That's all still fairly vague, but here, let me give you the list of countries. Australia, Brunei, India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. It does not include Taiwan. It's definitely worth noting. Now, that list of countries, it's very similar to the list of countries in China's Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's also a heck of a lot of the world's population and a huge chunk of the world's GDP. Especially if you consider that India is part of it. Obviously, China has been left out, not insignificantly. Obama was going to include China in the whole Asia-Pacific thing, and Biden's not. So it's not really a trade plan, and it's more like do you want to be part of our? Well, you can still be part of our club, though. We're not going to do the trade thing with you guys, but you can still join the club if you follow the rules of the club. That's actually China's criticism of it, is that it's like a clique of countries that are really intending to be somehow uncooperative.
Can I ask a question about the 4 pillars before you move on here? I just need a clarification. Those 4 pillars you're talking about don't seem to be things that China would be even interested in including at all.
Climate change,
clean energy, clean environment. I mean, it just seems like the 4 pillars you're talking about are directly, diametrically opposed to anything China's willing to do right now.
Or just about anybody out there when it gets right down to it.
Yes, well, absolutely. And there's going to be some questions about how does this agreement, how can this agreement have some sort of meaningful regulatory teeth to it? Are we going to be able to go to the Philippines, for instance, and say, you guys can't do all of these corrupt practices?
Well, first of all, if you've ever been to the Philippines, you understand that it's a country that's heavily polluted. I mean, environmentally, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. Diesels. Old diesels.
Well, not only old diesels, but I mean, there's sewage, they don't have modern sewage systems or anything like that.
I think they do in a lot of places.
Billy. Well, a lot of the country, there's 1,000 islands where it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
We really got to get the big picture here. This is the U.S. has decided not to engage with the Pacific in general. And we left it from January of 2017. We're 2.5 years into Biden's presidency. And only now are they saying, well, maybe we should try and do something over there. So China's been acting in a major power vacuum.
That's something we've been talking about over the last few months here on China Watch Radio. It's kind of like a hell hath no fuse.
Exactly.
When we ignore them, when we turn our backs on them, and China comes in and says, I'm going to give you security, I'm going to take care of your internet, I'm going to make sure everything's just right, I'm going to put a Confucian Institute there. Are we late for the break, Billy?
We're late for the break,
Billy.
But let's clarify. If you ignore your girlfriend, then she's going to be upset. And it's kind of what's happened in the South Pacific.
And so
why don't we take a break here, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Are we at war already with China?
Very good question. We'll be right back. Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Historically high gas prices, rising crime, unsecure borders, and this insane inflation. Are you done yet with the Biden progressive policies? Jimmy Panetta supports them all. Let's break up the Panetta-Pelosi team. Hello, I'm Dalila, and I'm running for Congress to help stop these progressive policies that are hurting all of us and our families. When you vote for me, you're voting for a fighter in Congress. So on June 7th, vote Dalila, D-A-L-I-L-A, for Congress.com. I'm Dalila Epperson, and I approve this message.
Spring is in the air, and that means it's time for...
What, allergies? Easter bunnies?
No, Charlie, it's time for electrical safety.
Of course. Hello, Charlie Friedman here with Chris Jensen from JM Electric. Spring is the season for safety.
That's right, Charlie. Every year, thousands are injured or killed by electricity around the home. But thankfully, we now have incredible technologies today, like arc fault circuit interrupters and tamper-resistant receptacles that can protect you from those electrical fires and shocks. JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if any of these devices or our current safe testing services are a good fit for their home.
Don't get a free tap dancing lesson from your electrical circuitry. Give my friends at JM Electric a call. They'll come to your home, have an expert look at your electrical systems, and tell you what can be done to make your home safe, just like they did for my home. And their visit won't cost you a dime. Give JM Electric a call at 422-7819 or visit jmelectric.com or on Facebook and tell them Charlie sent you.
User-Friendly Computing is Santa Cruz County's top-rated IT service and solutions provider since 1993. Here's why. Service and repair. Whether it's hardware or software, servers or a workstation, we'll fix it or find you a new one. Managed services. Optimize and protect your infrastructure with 24/7, 365 proactive monitoring. Cloud solutions. Cloud IT is the future of small and medium business technology management. Website design. Engage customers and grow your business with tools to update your own content. Backup and recovery. Ensure business continuity with a comprehensive backup and disaster recovery plan. And finally, security and compliance. Advanced security systems help protect your data and keep your business up and running. There's only one place to go for all your computer and IT solutions, User-Friendly Computing, 505 River Street in Santa Cruz. Give Peter and his friendly staff a call at 831-423-9653. And be sure to tell them you heard about it on KSCO.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online to save on boat, RV, and motorcycle batteries. For offer details and limitations, visit batteriesplus.com.
Don't we get to get the war drums? I love those war drums. Boom,
I'm
boom,
saving
boom,
the
boom,
drums for the end of the hour.
Oh, well, shucks. Hey, folks, this is China Watch Radio. We are back with the second half of the first hour. Actually, the third of the first hour.
We went a little long, folks.
And today we're talking a little bit about the strategic positioning in the Pacific with respect to China and the United States. We see China going to 10 nations in the South Pacific, those nations that have pretty much control of the entire South Pacific there. We're seeing Joe Biden threaten all-out war with China, and we're scratching our head, and we're looking at the history of China's relationship with the United States during the past 20 years and seeing that it looks like they've been at war with us all along. And we're gradually coming to the realization that maybe we are at war with them now. David?
You know, it's interesting. For several decades, we've had a policy of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan. We've recognized with a lot of other countries, right, that the one China policy, that unification may occur at some point in the future, but it should be done peacefully and in agreement.
But right now, it looks like a nice place to visit.
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty much the attitude.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting in that, Biden had a moment where, he asked the question, would we defend China? And we've always been strategically ambiguous. We had a lot of strategic ambiguity in that answer. And part of it is, I think we want to save face with China. I think we've told China some things privately over the last several presidential administrations, but we haven't said certain things publicly that would cause them then to have a reaction on the world stage like they have now. When Biden had said, would we go to war to defend Taiwan? And when he said yes,
I don't think he said he'd go to war. I think he said we'd defend Taiwan.
Well, we defend Taiwan.
Yeah, we'll fight.
We'll fight, basically. And it was interesting how that actually then triggered, this visceral response that we covered at the top of the hour in their reply. I thought what was kind of chilling is that, the punchline to their reply was this. It said, I would like to advise the U.S. to listen to a well-known Chinese song with these lyrics, quote, for our friends, we have fine wine. For jackals or wolves, we welcome with shotguns.
And there you go.
I think,
and that's that's wolf diplomacy that they've been using ever since the first of the year. Remember when we sent diplomats up to Anchorage to meet with China?
Yeah, remember their response? You're not even qualified to be here.
So they've been throwing stuff in our face for quite a while here. So
well, Anthony Belkin, to our Secretary of State, right? He had a pretty visceral reaction on camera when Biden made those comments. It's like, oh, how this is something we hadn't been prepared for.
Oh boy.
Well, so. Let's address that. Just a minute, Billy. Let's address that notion right there.
Well, that's what
we have Joe Biden making a statement that is totally out of bounds for you in terms of U.S. policy and diplomacy for decades.
But let me ask you the question.
Now, his staff comes in and says, no, this is not the way it is. So the question is, who's running the show?
Well, I got a better question than that.
And did you spill the beans on what we would actually do?
Yeah, see, that's my response.
Okay, exactly. Yeah. So if Joe, there's two different things here. Yeah. So did Joe Biden say what we're actually going to do?
Yes, he did.
Or did Joe Biden say what he thinks we should do?
Well, wait a minute, though,
so
Michael.
If that's just a minute, let me play it out here, Billy. If that's the case, that would indicate to me that somebody else is running the show instead of Joe Biden.
Very possibly. I mean,
I think look at it that way.
I think we've had a couple of playbooks, probably well established and for contingencies.
See, that's what
right?
I'm about to say.
And I think that Biden knows what those playbooks are.
So every president knows what those playbooks are. And here's the question you guys should all ask yourselves.
Yeah.
In reality. What would the American people want us to do? Mm-hmm. And you know what the answer to that one is? Defend Taiwan.
Yeah.
Baby.
Would you not say defend Taiwan? I'm asking a Republican. You.
I'm not a Republican. I'm Michael Olson.
I spent a lot.
You're very conservative.
I spent a lot of time in both countries, in China as well as Taiwan, and the contrast in the cultures is really interesting. A lot of the people I worked with, Taiwan is very left-leaning. West-leaning. They tilt much more towards the west than they do the east, which is interesting. All the people I worked with there, almost all of them, had gone to college here in the United States, but unlike a lot of other countries, they were desperate to get back home and work. And so they had...
Because there was opportunity there?
There's opportunity there.
And it was a sensitivity. They felt at home there?
That's exactly correct.
And they still have the culture.
They still have the culture. And you had a lot of the freedoms that you do in most Western societies when you're in Taiwan. And it's a very safe place. It's actually a very interesting
David,
country.
once again, I asked the question.
Yeah.
Who do you think the majority of Americans would tell the president to defend, to support? Mainland China or Taiwan?
Well, it's interesting how inculcated that the American people think our relationship is with Taiwan in terms of what our friendly lean is. That was interesting when we reported earlier how we may have an opportunity. We may see the issues going on in the Ukraine and within Europe, and there's an affinity between the U.S. and Europe. It'd be interesting to see how strong that affinity would be looking towards the east, back to Taiwan.
We defend Japan.
And Japan.
We defend Japan.
Australia and
South Korea.
But we defend Japan wholeheartedly. Yeah. We defend South Korea wholeheartedly. We defend the Philippines wholeheartedly. Australia, New Zealand, Palau, all of the Micronesian states.
That's correct, yes.
We defend all of those places. Why would we not defend Taiwan? It's a stupid question as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, then we don't need to answer it, then, if it's a stupid question. I've been thinking...
Go ahead, John. For a second, guys, take us in a completely different direction. Since we run the risk of kind of rehashing things that we've repeated before. I just want to... Look, I'm not in any way defending China, the CCP's perspective on Taiwan.
You can defend China.
No, I don't.
It'd be nice to have somebody do it.
But I do want to sort of draw out the diplomatic nuances of the situation. In order to come up with a solution to the situation that maybe does things like, I would say, avoids major conflicts. First of all, I feel like everyone loses if that happens. And then also achieves the objectives of maintaining Taiwan's independence, maintaining Taiwan's sovereignty. So in order to just sort of look at those two things, I think it helps understand the CCP's perspective. So their take on the situation, after the ROC retreated to Taiwan during the Civil War in 1949, Taiwan retained its sort of independence. It was a repressive military government for quite a while before it reformed and became much more of a democracy. And it was very much defended by the United States for the first 30 plus years of its history. It wasn't until the Taiwan Relations Act in 1949 that the U.S. sort of relaxed that ardent defense of Taiwan. At one point in time, leaked papers show the United States was planning to possibly use nuclear weapons to support an invasion of mainland China by the ROC back in the late 50s, early 60s. So the U.S. was very much on board with the defense of Taiwan for quite some time. And what we sort of stepped back to was this is the quote here: the United States will make available to Taiwan such defense articles and defense services in such quantity as may be necessary to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. Now, that's a pretty strong commitment to the place. And if you look at the billions of dollars in military equipment that have gone to Taiwan, it's been substantial. But we've also said we're going to have a policy of strategic ambiguity, I think sort of meaning we're not going to talk about it because we know it's going to really piss off the CCP. So the way the CCP sees it, it's kind of like if a certain group of Confederate soldiers in the American Civil War moved to an area of Florida and were able to defend it, and they said, no, we're going to still retain our independence. The Union may very well have been upset about that and wanted that territory back and not felt okay with that resolution. So that's the way the CCP sees it. They see it as an unresolved civil war, a civil war that never ended in territory that belongs to mainland China. Very strategic, valuable territory, by the way, because it gives them a lot more security in terms of being able to defend South China Sea trade. So, and in that context, at one point, Taiwan was working on getting a couple nuclear weapons back in the mid 80s, I think. And the U.S. stepped in and said, guys, don't do it. Let's just see how this plays out.
Wasn't that what happened in Ukraine as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
didn't we?
They gave up the nukes in exchange for protection, right. Which never happened. Yeah.
That was a deal, right?
Yeah. Well, lot to that story, guys. Yeah. I don't think we should brush over it.
Good perspective, though, John T.
It is, yeah.
And the final piece of that is that we're looking at a situation where China is in massive internal demographic and economic strain, and they don't have a very bright future. They're in a like do it now or you'll never be able to do it situation. So one of the ways in which to achieve our goals is to make sure that we don't give China an excuse to do it now, because you give it 5 years.
How do you do that?
Well, also
how do you do that, John?
Coming up
how do you say we're not going to do anything that would cause China to attack? If you say that, China will attack.
Well, also, you can't give them any help in the election coming up in November. Remember, reason all this is coming to a head right now is in November, Xi Jinping will either be Xi Jinping or he'll be gone.
I think Jonty hit on something really significant too. China has a demographic crisis that may force it to do something like this now, and as does Russia.
Right.
And that's why Russia did it now, because they're running out of people.
Well, not only that, their president decided to do it now before he goes away.
But they have these.
A long story there, guys. The Ukrainians were bombing the crap out of people in their own country, and Russia couldn't stand it politically.
Okay. Probably should stay away from the Ukraine story because it's not China.
Yeah.
So
similar situation, though.
I've heard talk recently from avid China watchers that Xi Jinping's back is against the wall.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to see that with respect to demographics.
Well, he's got real issues.
With respect to the economy and so on. So the most frightening thing is that when you get when you corner a mama bear, what happens? She attacks.
You see claws.
Yeah, you see claws. And I think Xi Jinping is somehow trapped by himself and his decisions and the demographics and everything else.
The U.S.'s bellicosity towards China is a domestic threat to the stability of the CCP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's, and as you say, it corners the mama bear. So I think there's reason to be careful. I wonder, though, if there would be a way of saying, look, our policy is that we will accept a potential future political resolution to the one China issue, but not a military one.
And that's been our policy, right? That was
always the hope.
That was always the hope. Right?
That's right.
But that's the reason why we've been selling arms and supporting Taiwan is that we didn't want this thing to be decided militarily. We wanted to decide through the ballot box.
And it was also historically the agreement in 1949 was also a diplomatic solution. Word solution to not having a war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we'll honor this one China policy, but Taiwan's still floating out here in the Pacific.
I want to circle back to something Jonty said earlier because I think it's really important context. Is that for a long time, they were the rebels that fled in Taiwan. It was a military dictatorship for a long time under Chiang Kai-shek.
And then they came around.
They came around, and it wasn't that long ago, really, that they became a republic and had an elected parliament. They have a legislature now, an elected president.
Set up their own government, a democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that kind of, I think, changes things a little bit for folks.
Well, for the United States perspective.
It does.
And, when it gets right down to it, if, as some China watchers say, Xi Jinping could pull the wall down on the CCP like Gorbachev did,
mm-hmm.
if Xi Jinping is just up against it and he pulls, that wall down and CCP goes away, what if you just supplant the nationalist government in Taiwan and put it into Beijing and you've got something that would work?
It's true.
Ooh.
It's a very interesting set of circumstances, and it's entirely possible.
Rebel strike back.
But we could see 3 or 4 Chinas within the next decade. I think there could be several independent countries.
Yeah, the East Coast would certainly love to get rid of the rest of China, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You could do business.
Well, not only that, you look at some of the cultures that are separate now inside the borders of China, and you look at you look at the Nepal, and you look at
but the CCP is doing everything it can to homogenize those cultures, to get rid of those ethnic cultures, and that's the whole purpose of throwing all the Uyghurs in jail. And
classic nation building.
Yeah.
And yet, all those efforts that are taking place, you still have the Uyghurs, and you still have the Nepalese, and you still, they all still exist.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is China Watch Radio. We've been working a little bit today with what's going on in China with respect to its moves, significant moves in the Pacific. Moves against Taiwan, threatening. Moves against the island nations of Micronesia and Polynesia.
And Melanesia.
Dealing. Just come on, let's work with us.
Poking at the folks in New Zealand and Australia with a heavy finger.
Yep. So, though China is in tough shape, it's still fighting this unrestricted war that it has been fighting against us for 20 years. And it's been terribly successful here in the United States. It's taken over a lot of our government officials. It's taken over education, our science facilities, our laboratories, our banks. It's taken over our education institutions. It's taken over the National Basketball Association. It's just been very, very effective at this concept of unrestricted warfare.
They're even chauffeuring Dianne Feinstein.
There you go. So
I'd forgotten about that.
It's the concept that to beat somebody who has bigger cannons than you do, you don't shoot cannons at them.
No, you ruin the wheels.
Yes, exactly.
There you go, Billy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you put a wheel chock on the cannon, and then you can't move the cannon. It's almost the same thing as blowing the cannon
up. And that's what China has been doing to us for 20 years.
We got our wheel chocks on us.
Well, listen, if you'd like to participate on our program, our second hour is coming up in just a moment. You need to call us at 479-1080, 479-1080, and we will get your call queued up during the news break. This is KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. News is coming up, and we'll be back with hour number 2 of China Watch Radio.
On Highway 17 is still moving well. There's a 10-minute delay on Highway 1 traffic from the Fishhook headed south. There's already a 13-minute delay in traffic on Highway 101 southbound between the Coyote Creek Golf Course and San Martin. Traffic is also slow-moving heading both east and west on Highway 156 near the Union Road traffic light. Weather forecast for tonight, mostly cloudy with lows around the high 40s. West-southwest wind around 6 miles per hour, becoming calm after midnight. Tomorrow, patchy fog before 7 a.m., otherwise cloudy, then gradually becoming mostly sunny with highs in the low 70s. Light west wind becoming west-southwest 9 to 14 miles per hour this morning, or tomorrow morning rather. Winds could gust as high as 18 miles per hour. Boat is forecast for tonight. Northwest winds 5 to 10 knots, wind waves 2 to 3 feet, swell south around 2 feet at 16 seconds. Tomorrow, west winds 10 to 15 knots, wind waves 2 to 3 feet, swell southwest around 2 feet at 16 seconds with more patchy, dense fog. And the time now, 7 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time to return to China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Those, ladies and gentlemen, are Chinese war drums. Are we already at war with China? That is the question of the day on the table. But also, if we are at war with China, which country do you think has the greatest desire to win? 831-479-1080 is the phone number. A lot happening out there in the Pacific these days, a lot. And we're wondering what impact all of that will have on the United States and those of us who live here. And that's what we do every Thursday from 2 to 4 here on China Watch Radio. And we always love it when you participate by picking up your phone and dialing 831-479-1080. We really don't know what's going on. We're trying to figure it out, but it's really, sometimes you look at what Xi Jinping is doing, and it just makes no sense at all.
Well, not to us.
Not to us.
We know what's interesting is in their press, they're from the Secretary of State, their statement they made, they basically accused us that you're either a friend or you're a jackal and a wolf.
Yep, there you go. And so there you either do what we tell you to do, or you're
on our you-know-what list.
But it's an interesting question, though, with regard to China, Michael. Are we China's friend? Because we pumped a lot of business and a lot of capital and a lot of stuff into China.
We loved them for 20 years. We gave them all of our money. We gave them all of our jobs.
Are we still their friends?
Everything we had, and they took it.
Oh, yeah.
And they built a magnificent country.
Well, aspects of that might be true, but as is so often the case, you can take a nation and say they did that, we did this, but it's not an accurate representation of the United States to say we did this, because I certainly had very little to do with it. There have been a variety of layers of the cake that have benefited in different ways, and China actually, I think, was leaned on pretty hard at the beginning of their massive industrialization process starting roughly 20 years ago. They were leaned on pretty hard to benefit U.S. businesses. They were taking all of our recycling, which I think they saw as quite humiliating, actually. They benefited, and they grew in power and wealth.
Yes, they did. They did. But you did have a lot to do with that, Jonty, because you paid taxes and you bought stuff that came from China, like we all did.
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple was maybe more influential in all of that than anything that any particular individual does.
Well, and General Motors.
General Motors, yeah. Who wasn't? Nike, everybody.
Or you look at Target and Walmart and Amazon, the storefront for China.
Yeah.
So to what extent did Wall Street, in general, Street benefit
heavily.
From the situation?
Look at BlackRock.
So to say they benefited and we didn't benefit isn't correct.
True.
We know that. We know that there were an element of our society benefited dramatically from the relationship with China.
That's true.
And still continue to.
Well, wait a minute. We don't know that anymore.
I'm so glad, though, that we have Jonty's perspective, because he does offset some of the mainland.
He's our nuance guy.
Yeah, the mainframe point of view.
I do have something else I want to offset, which is the idea that that all of a sudden China began practicing this type of unrestricted warfare.
No, it came from Sun Tzu.
As though they developed it. Well, I think it's worth noting that if you take a history class as a school student in China, there's an extent to which you're going to believe your own propaganda. But if you're a history student in China, you're going to learn about the century of humiliation that your country experienced, mostly at the hands of the British, but every major European power, the United States and Japan as well, had a regional influence in a part of China under various treaties. So there's a long period of time. We're talking about 100 years, but there was the British didn't have the military to occupy all of China, but what they did have is the ability to manipulate various warlords through different kinds of bribes, and also to push an opium epidemic into the country.
And do you think we're not paying for that now?
Or do we not see this massive fractionalization of our own society and political discord like we've never seen before? That might be a coincidence. Do we not see fentanyl crossing the border from Mexico that is somehow made out of components that tend to come from China? There's a variety of parallels.
Yeah.
So from a Chinese perspective, if you went into the mind of Xi Jinping, he's doing to the West what the West did to China in the previous century.
That's right. It is. It's a form of revenge, and it's also fascinating how they've tried to one-up us on all of the accomplishments the United States made the 20th century. I mean, just as a quick, walkthrough, right? We built the Hoover Dam. They're going to build the even bigger Three Gorges Dam.
Oh, yeah.
We built the Panama Canal. Guess what? They're widening the Panama Canal and making it bigger, right? We landed a probe on the moon. I mean, we don't admit it, but they landed a probe on the dark side of the moon. Right.
Well, and also, Japanese built bullet trains.
Yeah.
China built a bullet train that goes a long distance and very fast.
But you can go all the way through the 20th century, the accomplishments that the United States had, right, and our contribution to the world. And they've tried to supplant that with their own, parallel steps along the way to show, eminence, which I always find interesting. And in fact, even going down to what Johnny just mentioned, the fentanyl, right, crisis in the United States, right, trying to pay back the West for
the Opium Wars.
The Opium Wars back at the turn of the century.
Sure.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, 831-479-1080. You've got Billy, you got John T, you got David, you got Michael Olson, you have Susan, Simon, and Sam in the other room. So we're loaded for bear. What do you think? Do you think we're at war now with China? If so, which country do you think has the greatest will to win?
All right.
831-479-1080.
Let's take some phone calls. We'll check in first with Tom. Right. Tom, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, I like the premise of your question because we've been really at war, in my opinion, ever since Nixon, made peace, so to speak, with China, made the famous détente. And I just don't think America really knows, what communists are all about. And I suggest that they do some reading. I wondered why anyone, including any of your panel, would believe that Xi Jinping and the Communist Party would accept any kind of split up of their country at all.
Only in the case of a catastrophe in which he had no control would he accept something like that. That's what I think. I mean, if he were in a fix like Gorbachev, where he didn't really have any choice, then maybe he would accept it. Maybe he would even engineer it like Gorbachev did. I don't know. But
well, don't you think that they read up and studied what Gorbachev
most certainly did,
and are completely intent on avoiding it?
Most certainly did.
Well, I don't think
and perhaps that's why Xi Jinping did an about-face.
That's right.
With westernization. To hell with you, and to hell with your real estate, and to hell with your industries. I don't want them. I don't care. We're buttoning up this country, and we're going to protect us from you. Seems to be what he's saying.
Well, we read a headline earlier this week that they were trying to protect their senior diplomats and officials from sanctions, Western sanctions. So you're talking about hardening things up. I mean, it's
Yeah, building a fence around them is what they're doing.
So, I don't see where you really answer my question is about, other than yes, a massive catastrophe that would be out of their hands. I suppose the same thing could happen to the United States as well. But why or how would Xi Jinping and the Communist Party, by the way, isn't he president for life?
Not yet. Not yet. November will be the deciding.
They renew it. Don't they renew it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
He has competition. He does. Tommy has competition right now.
He doesn't. He does not have any competition. He has people nipping at his heels, but nobody stood up and said, I should be the premier of China. And there's no reform movement in the Chinese Communist Party. None. So, really...
Hasn't he destroyed all...
yeah.
He's destroyed all opposition.
Well, not all opposition. He still has the...
Same as what Putin did.
He has the group of people that are backed by... I can't remember his name. Guys, help me out.
Jiang Zemin.
Yeah, Jiang Zemin. And so they are still trying to...
They're in lockdown.
Yeah, they're in lockdown right now. But
there's competition in Shanghai, and they're all locked down.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, they're locking down Beijing now, too.
Yeah, they are.
Well, the re-election of Xi and the continuation of the CCP are two very different things. He could be replaced with somebody just like him. He could also be replaced with somebody more like Hu Jintao, who I think was, or Deng, who
he was
not nearly as interested in conflict with the West as Xi has been. So there's some questions there. There's an article that I was actually hoping we'd get to at some point today, and this might be a very appropriate time to bring it up. An article in the Federalist called "A New Declaration of Independence Movement Aims to Introduce American Values to Chinese Citizens." I was interested to see our old friend Dr. Li Minyan. She's been on with us before. The article was really an interview with her talking about this movement. She's obviously a supporter of it. I don't know how big it is, but apparently there was some guy named Ma, not Jack Ma, some other Ma, we presume, who was mentioned in some Chinese state media report, and he's putting forward this kind of declaration of independence for individual Chinese citizens, encouraging them to consider themselves as being.
And where is he doing this?
Well, he did it online. He sort of sent this thing out, and then he got picked up by the authorities by the looks of it. How big this movement is, though, that's a very interesting question. But it might give us an idea of what a change looks like. It's like Enron. Everything happened slowly, and then it happened all at once.
Yeah, it would have to happen all at once, I think, because China, the CCP, now has such an incredible enforcement mechanism in their social credit system. If they don't like you, they can flash red on your cell phone.
Yeah,
you can't buy food.
They don't need to have police officers.
Yeah.
They can just cancel
Turn you off. Cancel you. Yeah. So
there's a new feature which will actually tell you geographically where people with low social credit scores are, so you can avoid them. Like, I don't want to go in that coffee shop.
The new leprosy.
Yeah.
The new leprosy. Yeah.
Tom, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Great call, Tom. Thank you. And I think he's right. You can't see something like a regime change coming from Xi Jinping. No. He's going to fight with everything he has to become the emperor for life. And he's going to do everything he can to use the CCP to just clamp down on everything so that nobody can breathe freedom.
China's a very vast country, and it's just surprising how big it is and how diverse it is in its terrain and its people. I'm reminded when I was a kid, I asked my dad once, we were looking at something on the Soviet Union, and I said, why would people put up with this? Why is Russia, why are the communists building walls through, to separate the East and the West? And, he just looked at me and he said, son, one day the people will decide they've had enough. And that happens to every society. Yeah. One day the people just have enough.
That's how our country was founded. Yeah. We decided we had enough of the king.
Yeah. And imagine how paranoid that makes Xi Jinping and the CCP.
Exactly.
Because they know that.
Yeah.
They did it.
Well, to your point, I want to go back to your question about are we at war with China? And I'm wondering if they're actually on a two-front war. One is the CCP with their own people to keep them suppressed and in line, and also, again, looking outward past their border to the west.
There you go. So who's up?
So we have a couple of other callers. Let's head to Dick, and let's see if I got to push the right button here. Dick, you're on China Watch Radio.
479-1080 out there. Give us a ring.
831-479-1080.
So I wanted to touch on two things. Davos with Kissinger and Searle comments about the problems. Basically, Kissinger said that the war in Ukraine should be settled. We should force the Ukrainians to settle and give up land, give up the eastern part of Ukraine. And then Soros said Russia and China collusion in war alliance and warns of World War III. I don't know if you guys
saw that. He said it could be the end of civilization.
Yeah, right.
All those folks at Davos scare me.
They're the ones who scare me.
I don't know what they got planning, but I'm scared of them guys.
Well,
amen.
I think you should listen to them. That's for sure. Anyway, take it as whatever, 2 cents. The other thing was I sent you a connection to a YouTube for Mike Adams and J.R. Nyquist about the 56-minute meeting that was released out of interior China of the generals of a certain military province meeting, and the translated notes. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that YouTube I sent you, but basically everybody should listen to it.
What did they say?
Condense it for us.
They said a lot, and people should listen to it. Mike Adams, J.R. Nyquist. YouTube.
Well, give us a hint.
What's the headline?
Yeah. That's not fair to tease us like that.
This translation went over all these points. They're basically revamping a lot of civvy ships to military use. They're calling up recruits. They're starting to close down Walmarts in places overseas. They're slowing down their port manufacturing of exports. They're expecting a large shutdown of the exports. They're locking down, like Mike said, up to 260 million people now in China, and they're basically converting to a wartime footing.
That's true, and that's probably why they shut down everything, closed the door, locked up tight.
Right, exactly.
Well,
you can't touch us.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
If you, Mike, if you listen to that, it will shock you.
Yeah.
It will shock you the depth that J.R. Nyquist goes into the antagonistic attitude and military stance that are changing right now as we talk.
Well, Dick,
China.
there is the idea that because of the one-child policy for so many years, the Chinese military simply can't sustain itself.
There's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people, but
still a lot.
But the country is getting way older, and they're not. The population is going to decrease dramatically.
And again, that's why if they're going to move,
they got to do it now.
Yeah.
They got to do it soon. So that's what makes it even more scary. Did you see the reports coming out of China that somebody got into the CCP's computer files for Xinjiang and released a ton of really bad information. And some of it points right to Xi Jinping saying that we have to get rid of the Uyghur culture and religion. We have to take that away from them.
Well,
it also talks about the prison-like nature of these rehab facilities.
Oh yeah.
We heard from Nori Turkle last week. Go ahead, Jonty. Yeah.
If I could, guys, just real quick for the benefit of our audience, if you go to ChinaWatchRadio.com and you take a look at today's article on the Know Before the Show section, there is a link in there to the Zhejiang police files. So you can find all the stuff that Michael's talking about. on our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com.
Well, and also if they replayed last week's show from Nori Turkel, right?
Nori Turkel,
we understand exactly how that's operating, how that's a
scary stuff. And so let me ask you really quickly, what do you think those island nations in the Pacific think when China comes and says, we want to take care of your security? We want to manage your internet for you.
I hate to say it, but it's like you said. There's something going on in China internally that's very suspicious. Oh, sorry. It was very suspicious of their motivations, which we keep guessing at. But the experts are saying that you can count on them expanding to their natural size and ability, and maybe being pushed into certain political, military scenarios and situations that we can't comprehend, just like them locking down 260 million of their people.
It's almost like they're playing three-dimensional chess, and we're playing checkers, and we're trying to figure out what the heck are you doing?
It's like watching that Star Trek episode where Spock is playing three-dimensional chess with the captain, Captain Kirk, and Captain Kirk is obviously doesn't know what the heck's going on at all. Anyway, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Nick's up next.
Nick's up next, but first we got to take a commercial break.
Okay, good.
All right, so we'll be right back on China Watch
479-1080.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Hi, this is Deidre with Zinnia's Gift Boutique at 219 Mount Herman Road in Scotts Valley. We are having so much fun. We've got lots of new giftables, lots of new artists that we've sourced. You know, we have items that are being produced more in the United States than ever. We've always tried to do U.S. sourced, and so we're leaning in even heavier to that. And the amount of manufacturing that's starting back up, even in a cottage industry, where they're able to source and make the pumps that go on a soap bottle so that American-made soap has an American-made pump and they're able to ship it to us. Warms my heart to see our country of artisans and manufacturers band back together. Pieces that are from young children. I have a girl that does stickers that brings them into me once a month in her shoebox, and I just love her and I love her product, and it's so fun to watch this little entrepreneur. Zinnia's is located at 219 Mount Herman Road in Scotts Valley. Open Monday through Saturday 9 to 6:30 and on Sundays 9 to 5:30.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online to save on boat, RV, and motorcycle batteries. For offer details and limitations, visit batteriesplus.com.
KO here with your KO sports questions of the day. USA Today reports that our attention span only lasts an average of 8 seconds. Maybe that's why baseball fans can't get their friends and family to sit through 9 innings. Let me know what you think. Tune in to Good Morning Monterey Bay. I'm on with Rosie and Bill at 7:12. And I'm on with Dave Michaels and the Flight 1080 crew at 5:35. Don't forget to log on to KSCO.com, click the KO banner, and vote.
Recently on Flight 1080.
But I have to tell you, Billy, there's one thing that I cannot stand, Billy, and today it became... What? People who don't make complete stops. That drives me crazy, and I make complete stops.
So you're telling me that they assume that you're going to do a California stop? Well, you know why, don't you?
Why?
Because you're Dave Michaels and you're a cool dude.
Oh, give me a break. Nothing is cooler than obeying the law, you guys.
Are you kidding me?
All I'm saying is that if you happen to be driving behind a KSCO vehicle, it makes complete stops. So keep that in mind and don't hit me, okay?
How often does this happen to you?
All the time, every day, Billy. There's always mass confusion at the four-way stops when Dave's there because Dave makes complete stops like some kind of idiot.
They're going to work and they're like, there's that idiot in that KSCO car. He's going to stop. I know it.
He loves complete stops.
Flight 1080, Monday through Friday from 4 to 7 p.m. right here on AM 1080 KSCO.
Did he actually say that... He did. He said that. That's a funny promo.
Hey, folks, welcome back. This is the final few minutes, or final half hour of China Watch Radio. We have Bill Graff, we have Jonty Collier, David Welch. There's Sam in the control room, and yours truly, Michael Olson. We're talking about China and whether, in fact, we are at war with China. David Welch brought up a very interesting point in the break. David.
Well, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of an example where a country has won a military conflict without the full support of its people. And in China, they've got this full suppression campaign across a lot of their populations.
Everybody's in jail.
Ethnic groups. Yeah, because we've covered exactly, why China a prison. So how can you have enough attention across the leadership of the CCP to keep your foot on the neck of your opponents within the country and be able to execute a campaign outside of your borders?
The only way you can do that is with total control.
But he asked a very good question. Has there ever been an instance where
nobody's had total control?
Well, wait a minute now.
Adolf Hitler had total control for a little while.
And he lost.
Saddam
Hussein had total control. And he had the world's third biggest army. Remember, he was the big boogeyman. He got crushed.
USSR, back when it was the Soviet Union.
But none of those had total control like the cell phone control that Xi Jinping has. Yeah. Click, you're gone.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning the various statements of Yuval Noah Harari, who's an intellectual, he's a darling of the Davos folks. He's been very controversial for repeatedly saying that we now have the ability to hack human beings. I don't think he doesn't. The conspiracy crowd, eats that stuff up. I don't think they're fair to him necessarily, because he's also said things like, "But it's really important to remember that human beings have a soul," things like that. But I think he's stating something that we're becoming increasingly aware of, that we can be not just sort of broadly manipulated through propaganda processes, but we can be very articulately, precisely, individually manipulated by systems of conformity, the likes of which we've never seen before.
Yeah. But I'm just curious, if we go back to the question for a minute of the tools of control, Michael, that you're bringing up, I think, Jonty, you were kind of alluding to as well. I mean, those tools of control are very sophisticated today, right? You mentioned, they know what you're doing through your phone. But the tools of control, though, have always been, commensurate proportional to the era and time that people were in. I think people look back at the Nazis and the Gestapo and how absolute, how they had their thumb down on the entire population, where they could get Jews to turn in Jews, right? They knew everything that was going on, and they controlled the amount of leakage, in the society.
Usually they did that with neighborhood committees, which of course China has.
Right. Well, China traditionally had a very strong bureaucratic system. Right. And if you look at any time that China thrived, they had a very strong meritocratic, bureaucratic system, and they very often had the support of some form of secret police at the same time.
But now they don't even have to be secret. All they need is a phone.
But at some point, if they take their foot off the gas, off the pressure off somebody's neck just a little bit, they know that people will gather. People will come out into the streets.
Well, you happen to bring up Hitler, the SS Nazis, okay? Yeah. But then look at what happened. I mean, guys like Oskar Schindler, who saved, lots of Jewish people.
That's right.
And he was part of the system.
That's right. He was.
But he turned on him and said, "Wait a minute, this is not right."
Somebody leaked the computer files on Xinjiang and the Uyghurs. So somebody made a very dashing thing to do. But David, you just mentioned, people are gonna, as soon as you release the pressure a little bit, people are going to run out into the streets. Well, now they can see exactly who ran out into the streets.
But do they have the time and attention to actually respond to it, right?
No, they don't need to. All they have to do is turn off your phone, and you can't buy food.
But if the government is fully engaged in a conflict, let's say in Taiwan, and it's going to have the world against them in many ways, how would they have the resources? If people come into the streets and they just go, take the food, I mean, how would you stop people in mass?
Turn off the phones.
But even if the phones are off.
Yeah. I mean,
People
I see
will
where
still
he's coming
protest.
from. In other words, the whole thing with class.
So you grab the food and you run and you go home, and you sit in your house and you eat the food you stole.
Yeah.
Well, you've been followed all the way to the store and all the way back
But
home.
I'd argue at that point it wouldn't be individual effort; it would be mass rebellion.
Yeah. Well,
and that gets difficult.
They don't have enough police
to do that. No.
Yeah.
There's an important bit of math, and it's frightening. There's a frightening, very important bit of math, and that is that we have an increasing utilization of automated systems and robotic technologies, etc. And there's an amount of joules. You could measure with calories or joules or watts the amount of energy that's being exerted by any particular population. And what we're seeing is a transition from where the majority of the joules, the majority of the energy is being exerted by the human biological system, and instead we have a majority of the energy being exerted by increasingly automated systems. At a certain point in time, not only does the traditional concept of a human become obsolete, but also it becomes, I think, very close to impossible for the will of any group of humans to resist the power of the system. So simply because we don't have the literal wattage, we don't have the actual energy to be able to even compare.
So what you're saying is that there's actually more energy being expelled into artificial intelligence and computer systems and networks and the surveillance system, like Michael was mentioning, through cell phones, than there is from the ability of human energy to actually mount any type of a rebellion.
If there's one human per every 10 robot policemen, good luck staging a revolt.
Yeah, there you go.
But you could stage a revolt simply by turning off the electricity. The cell phones wouldn't work. They couldn't cancel you. It would. There you go.
Your cell phone doesn't work. They come knocking on your door.
Well, yeah, but they don't have enough police to do that on every door.
Knocking down transmission lines is not that difficult. That's low
If
tech.
the AI is smarter than you are, good luck outsmarting the AI.
Let's try Nick.
Nick in Royal Oaks. Which phone line is he on? He's on line 1. Nick, welcome to China Watch Radio.
Thanks. I like to think Xi Jinping's objective in the South Pacific is a suntan and the basis his Olympic surf team. So to keep it in that mindset, I think it's probably the last on his list. But it's a liberty that can be true. So when I think of those islands like the Solomons and anything outside of Guam, I think the marijuana laws are very tight and don't even think about it. What is it like? Because it should be introduced. Anything China's getting near should be accustomed to cannabis, because it's probably an origin from their country and it's very shunned.
Well, that's for sure, Nick. They have a long history of cannabis in China.
Well, but they also have a long history of dealing with drugs. The opium wars were a prime example of how to, get under somebody's thumb.
Now we're here with fentanyl.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for the call, Nick. Great call.
Let's check in with Mike in Santa Cruz. Mike, you're on KSCO.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. My question goes for John T. Regarding Russia and Ukraine conflict. And, it was quite a number of years back ago when George Bush Sr. said 1,000 points of light with regard to establishing centers of democracy across the face of the earth for, a new world government agenda. And John T. seems to have a little insight into the hubris of American journalism. How could he see this in regard to a deep state NATO agenda using Ukraine as one of those 1,000 points of light? And has the American Journalistic Society run? Have they been vulnerable to biased journalism, hubris? If he could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
I think we really should figure out a way to deal with the question of Ukraine. Herbert Walker Bush, if that's he actually made a statement saying that we really should not try and make Ukraine a part of NATO. With regards to all of that, I just want to have a quick summary, and then maybe we can figure out a better strategy within some other context to develop that whole circumstance. But it's important for us to see through the propaganda of our various geostrategic adversaries, as well as it is important to see through our own propaganda. But maybe I can just leave it there for now, and we can figure out a way to deal with the topic in a more comprehensive way.
Thank you for the call. We appreciate it, Mike.
479-1080.
You know, I find it very interesting that when we talk about China, for instance, we talk about, we want to tend to refer to it as one big geopolitical idea. And it strikes me that when you have a country of that many people, over 1.5 billion people, there's got to be a different point of view.
Well, I think and I was trying to allude to that a little bit earlier, and that's a great thing to bring up, Billy, because it is not a monolithic country. It has got enormous geographical and social and cultural diversity across the entire tapestry of the nation. And I think trying to control that and make it monolithic is very, very difficult. I think people letting go of their regionality and even some of their foods and their language. And
isn't that Xi Jinping's biggest obstacle? Is trying to get control of all of that information?
Homogenizing his own people. I think that's actually a fairly brutally difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and with respect to what's going on over there, I think we have to really make a distinction between China and the CCP.
Exactly.
And I think that they're two different things. China is a magnificent country with 9,000 years of recorded history.
Beautiful people.
Beautiful people. Wonderful culture. The CCP are a bunch of fascist Nazis.
Yeah.
Who don't want anybody to think about anything except them. They hate Christians, they hate Buddhists, they hate Jews, they hate Tibetans, they hate Uyghurs, they hate everybody.
He doesn't think like them.
It doesn't think like them.
So how, Jonty, tell me what you think about that, because that's a statement that's just scary to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to that coin, and one is the autocratic nature of the power structure. The other side of that coin is Marxist philosophy, which is a very forward-looking philosophy. Marxism is in no way about trying to learn the valuable cultural and traditional lessons from the past. It's about trying to make a break with the past in order to create a more just future. At least that's the intention.
Two legs good, four legs bad.
Right. Yeah. Sure. But it also, I mean, it's been used as justification for some very severe breaks with tradition in the past. The Cultural Revolution would be one example, but it also comes to mind that that Pol Pot and friends marched 3 million people out of the capital city of Cambodia and made them all become farmers again, and killed anybody that was wearing glasses because they were.
Well, and that's what they were trying to do with the Cultural Revolution too. They were trying to turn everybody into farmers.
But the question for the team though is that China's Achilles heel, right? The CCP, where they're actually trying to homogenize such a vast group of diverse people. Is that possible?
Well, there's not that much diversity, I don't think. I think the majority of people are Han Chinese. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what percentage of minorities there are.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of even the geographies. If you look at, Upper and Outer Mongolia and Tibet and, the region with the Uyghurs, right, where Xinjiang we're talking about last week, right? All the different provinces and states, they all have kind of their own cultural center
Flavor.
to them and flavor. Yeah, and they've tried to, turn that all into some kind of homogenous goo. But I'm not sure it's.
We tried to do that with television.
Yeah, the people in Mongolia are way different than the people in Shanghai.
Exactly.
And the people in Tibet are way different than the people in,
But the point Michael brought up earlier about the CCP trying to wallpaper over all of those differences and variances as to, one uniform view of the country, I'm not sure that's sustainable.
Well, that's the question that probably keeps Xi Jinping and the mob up at night when it gets right down to it. How are we going to keep our thumb on 1.4 billion people?
Yeah.
What, John?
Who don't lie.
Well, I think Sorry,
Go ahead, John T.
I was going to say, China does have a very potent culture in terms of their ability to court their kind of near the countries close to them and further away. That culture relies heavily on their success in terms of economic development. But there's also, again, there's this issue of the power vacuum. If you look at the United States, I think that power vacuum has actually come from a cynicism that was justly created. And this is one of the things I really feel like we need to hold our own feet to the fire, and this is something we can do in a democracy. And we need to be confessing about the mistakes that the United States has made. The U.S. has been at the end of the Second World War, every country in the world looked to the U.S. as this kind of cultural icon. And that has been massively squandered repeatedly through military interventionism that was largely not necessary. It certainly didn't gel well with the principles under which the United States mobilized for the Second World War.
Yeah, and with that, John T., I would like to throw in cultural degradation as well. I mean, if you're living in Podunk, Sweden, and you look across the waters to the United States, are you admiring our culture these days?
Well, there's a lot of videos on the internet, on YouTube and whatnot, just having people drive through inner city areas in the United States, showing, they refer to them as zombie videos because there's just so many folks who are so messed up on drugs that they're just sort of trying to stand up. And it's
literally.
I imagine it's nothing like it was 30 years ago.
But the key difference, though, is that we invite criticism and debate, and eventually we will go through a river of problems, but there's a corrective feedback loop that we've got integrated into the way our country was founded that you just don't have in a place like China.
But isn't it broken? I don't believe we have that corrective feedback loop. We have criminality happening in the political class that never gets punished. And we fail to have the meritocracy that we used to have. We don't really have it's not functioning at the moment. We don't have the checks and balances that we need in order to deal with these major problems all over the world.
And also we have a PR problem, and I hate to put it this way, but we have other countries who do it better than us. I mean, there are no other countries, industrialized, modern nations that have mass shootings like we do. Do you realize that we've had 23 incidents in the first 5 months of this year, 23 separate incidents of mass shootings? No other country in the world has that.
We have a big problem with mental health in this country. There are issues of mass killings in other countries as well. Like Japan, it's done with swords and knives. I mean, but we have a lot of crazy in this country that's developed over the last 20 years, which is just astonishing.
And look, that's a PR problem for the rest of the world.
Now, wait a minute. This is very interesting. For the last 20 years, things have been falling apart. And for the last 20 years, China has been conducting unrestricted warfare on the United States of America. How? Not with guns and tanks. They've been attacking our cultural institutions, our everything, our elite. They've been on the warpath, And we have just sat there and decomposed and degraded in front of them.
It's a very good observation.
And now they're looking at us and going, we're going to take over this Taiwan and you're not going to do anything about it. And we're going to take over the South Pacific and you're not going to do anything about it. And 20 years they've been working at it. Unrestricted warfare.
And it coincides with the signing of the WTO.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A very, very astute observation. It's the WTO and then also the ascension of organizations like the IMF and World Bank. The United States had something like 2% of our economy devoted to financial services in, I think, 1980. It's now about 25%. In other words, the percentage of our economy that is Wall Street has gone from a small little percentage to almost a quarter. So there's an extent to which I'm sure China is involved in the degradation of our culture and society and the proper functioning of our various civil systems.
Absolutely.
But there's also an extent to which, we as a nation have allowed an elite class to go ahead and
take over
the weapon at our foot and fire.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have the notes handy at my fingertips here, but there was several months ago, there was that Beijing college professor that spoke candidly on a hot mic. That was interesting. I don't know if you remember this, Michael, where he said we could always control the presidency of the United States through Wall Street.
Yep.
That they had enough friends that they had.
That was Deng Xiaoping. I'm pretty sure it was Deng Xiaoping
Yeah, it was.
said that. Yeah.
It actually was Deng Xiaoping.
And it was fascinating was they said, and then along came Trump, and we couldn't control him.
Yep.
And I thought, and where is he today, right?
And what happened to Trump?
Yeah, exactly.
What happened to Trump? So the China has developed these incredibly effective weapons that degrade the enemy, and we are the enemy, whether we want to be or not. You know, for all those 20 years, we thought we were doing the right thing.
You know,
we thought we were going to help lift China up. And that was the spirit.
Yeah, it was.
Well, look, we call it lift China up. Did China see it as that? Did China see us as wanting to essentially help them into overthrowing their own government?
No.
Help them into Taiwan democracy movement?
No.
Help. They didn't necessarily see us wanting to help them. They saw two parties that wanted something to gain, and I think the political class in the U.S. was quite happy to try and take advantage in that situation, gain advantage for U.S. corporations, their Wall Street buddies to have higher stock dividends and buybacks and you name it. So I don't know that it's. I think we had malicious intent toward China during that 20 years as well.
I'm not
I
sure
would push
if
back
it
on that
was
a little
all
bit.
that malicious.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yes, we were thinking about doing
They would
business.
see it as malicious. We thought they were going to turn into a democracy.
Certainly, we saw it as cheap labor, and let's get some stuff, and China will get what they want. They'll get money, and we'll get cheap stuff back.
The U.S. was happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we went into Russia to help them become a democracy. And the IMF came in, and they said, you guys are under austerity measures, and we're going to bury your economy.
Yeah.
And it took them 15 years to recover. So that's potentially what our political class had in mind for China.
But look what we did to our own country. Look. Early on in this, the evolution of this particular program, I told the story about my wife and I when we built our house, trying to buy a iron, right? Couldn't buy an iron made in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They were all made in China, right? Okay, but what that did may have helped China a little bit. But boy, it sure hurt our economy. We don't build irons anymore.
No, I remember the Clinton administration talking about the Chinese entry in the WTO, where they said this is good for us, it's good for China, it's good for the world. The rise of prosperity in the middle class will create a political reform in the country. And I agree, John, that there was probably, I think, there were people behind the scenes who thought this as an economic opportunity for the United States. But I do think, though, we thought that this was probably just a net benefit for the world to bring them in.
And that's what I think, and that's what I experienced.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll help the United States?
What really convinced me that it wasn't so was the CCP.
Yeah.
And as a contrarian, I'd never survive it. So let me ask all of us here, Billy, do you think we are now at war with China?
Indeed.
John T?
Yes.
It may very well be a conflict that has been happening for 200 years.
David?
They're at war with us on a battlefield we haven't yet recognized.
There you go. That's kind of the way I see it. They've been fighting us for 20 years, and we're just now starting to wake up to the fact.
And I will maybe be positive here. We know how to fight these kind of wars because we did it with the USSR, and we won.
Right.
Okay? We know how to fight a Cold War really well. We're good at it. But in order to be good at this one, we have to realize it's there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what we're talking about. So now, do you think we have the will to win? Have we woken up to the fact?
Let's put it a better way. Do we have the will to survive? Because that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Do you think we have the will to fight for the South Pacific, Billy?
I would hope so. Having lived out there, I certainly hope so.
John T., what do you think?
I think that we have that will now. I don't know how long that's going to last.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. David?
Have we developed a sense of strategic priority and necessity with the American people? Do they understand what's at stake?
No.
No. No, that's a resounding no for me.
No.
John
T., what do you think? No?
Well, Taiwan is so critical to global supply chains that it's comical. But I think the U.S. could move and is moving to bring semiconductor production back to the U.S., or at least NAFTA.
There you go. And, I think NAFTA would be a pretty good place for us to start looking these days.
Well, certainly we should begin to help the countries immediately around us.
Exactly.
Don't you think?
Strengthen North America.
So thank you all out there for tuning in China Watch Radio today. We're trying to come to grips with the fact that China's on the march in the Pacific. And they're not messing around, not at all.
If you want to find out more about our program, check out all the work that Jonty's done on our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com. All the information we've been talking about, all the work parts are there. Just all you have to do is go and see it.
Everything but the war drums.
Well, the war drums are...
There they are.
There they
If you listen loud enough, you can hear them every day.
Oh, yeah. All right. It's coming up on Flight 1080. That's up after the national news at the top of the hour and some traffic information. Keep it right here on AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz.